Next up, I'm excited to introduce to you an amazing set of executives here to discuss the ways organizations can go about driving AI initiatives forward. Joining us, we have Minh, Chief Talent Officer at Stanley Black & Decker, Ameen Kazerouni, Chief Analytics Officer at Orangetheory Fitness, Ambica Rajagopal, Group Chief AI Officer at Michelin, Gabe Dalporto, CEO of Udacity, and Mahe Bayireddi, co-founder and CEO of Phenom People. Please join me in welcoming Minh, Ameen, Ambica, Gabe, and Mahe to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. We've got an exciting 40 minutes ahead of us with a fantastic panel. There's a lot of knowledge and expertise to be shared, so I'm excited and honored to be here amongst this group. We'll start off with some quick introductions. Mahe, we can start with you.
Yeah, I'm Mahe Bayireddi, CEO, co-founder of Phenom People.
Minh?
Hi, my name is Minh. I'm the Chief Talent Officer for Stanley Black & Decker. Happy to be here.
Ambica?
Hi, Ambica Rajagopal here, Group Chief AI Officer for Michelin.
And Gabe?
Hi, Gabe Dalporto, CEO of Udacity. And for those of you who don't know us, we help train the world's workforce and the careers of the future.
Awesome. And my name is Ameen Kazerouni. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Orangetheory Fitness. And Orangetheory is a boutique in-studio, high-intensity interval training experience with some technology at play and some science at play and some great coaches. So with that, we've got some exciting questions to dig into, and we'll jump right into it. Our first question is, applying AI to a business is difficult to navigate. What is your fundamental understanding of AI, and how does that enable companies to think strategically about its application? Gabe, let's just start with you.
Fantastic, thank you. And it's a really good question. And when you're thinking about how to strategically deploy AI, it really starts with leadership. And I think one of the biggest challenges we see with our clients is a lack of kind of understanding among business line and functional leaders around how to deploy AI and how to develop that strategy. So what are the types of business applications where I could deploy AI? Where does it apply? Where does it not apply? How do I avoid things like bias and ethical traps? And so, generally is how do you get your business line leaders an understanding of AI and how to enable them to build those strategic business cases. Udacity built an AI for business leaders program to address this, but the real challenge is getting your leadership aligned.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Gabe's comments. Because those are the two things that I tend to keep front of mind as well. So number one is not just the data scientist and the talent that is specific to the AI field, but really the entire organization, bringing them along in the journey to understand and appreciate this relatively new technology, making sure that there is sufficient focus on that part as well. And of course, it's a I started my career with a PhD in math, and so even from the technical side, there is it's not it's not something that is a misnomer to say that there is a black box nature to AI or something that that remains to be understood. And so I think really taking this problem head on, using both the technology side, the math side of it, as well as embracing skepticism both within the data science community as well as from the business community, making it in fact part and parcel of the way that we actually do AI and data science, and thus building an atmosphere of trust around the technology. I think these are the two parts. The only thing that I would really add to that is, nothing succeeds like success. So, get things out there, get things into production, and really, for the leaders of groups such as myself, particularly, keep your eye on the ball, to just, get things out in the wild. So.
Awesome. Minh, curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure, and I love Ambica's quote on nothing's like success. So I'll give a non-technical answer if I may. I think of artificial intelligence as a friend that can do math really well and learn on the job. So whatever problems can be assisted with math, pattern recognition, and automation, AI has a chance to do that. Whatever problems math and automation cannot help with, in my opinion, we're a long way off on AI, and some of our panelists may disagree with me here. So I've seen AI help a group of humans make better decisions, improve the customer experience, identify cost-saving opportunities. We're not at a point where mainstream AI can make a lot of judgment-based decisions or replace whole humans. In my opinion, we're just not nowhere near there. So that's what I keep in mind. And what I try to keep in mind every time I'm in a conversation about artificial intelligence is AI, and I learned this the hard way, AI takes more time, people, money, and data to do homegrown than most business leaders anticipate. Everyone wants to do AI, but it's really hard to do. That's my fundamental understanding of it.
Thank you, Minh. And Mahe, let's wrap with your thoughts.
So from my perspective, like the whole thing, I agree with everybody's comments, but AI should be really aligned with your company's purpose. Don't do AI because it's the new wave or the new thing which is really popular. Do it because it can enhance your company's purpose. Yeah. Whether it is saving costs or really making sure you personalize for some people so that they can really connect with it in a much more thoughtful. In our case, we always think about experience for talent is the most important fabric. That's the only reason why we use AI. Rest all is immaterial to us, and how it can make a difference there.
I think we got some great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying I'd like to push back on Minh's comments on homegrown a little bit. I think it's ultimately, what is AI? So it is the building of or the modeling of a specific physical process. Or a business process. So this could be, a part of a manufacturing. It could be, how human beings, identify objects. But ultimately, it's a physical process. It's a business process. And what AI does is essentially, with greater success than practically any other technology in the history of mankind, is able to model it. And I think I always like to challenge the thought that it is something that can be adopted from somewhere else, because in fact every AI is specific to the business process, to the physical process that it is being that is being modeled. So we are indeed, as exactly as Minh said, very far away from generic solutions for very very generic problems. Of which there are large classes, let's say, chatbots for particular customer voice or something, which have the same problem repeated over industries. Yes, there may be a general solution, but the vast predominant majority of AI problems don't sort of fall into this class. So what it really calls for is, carefully adapting existing AI research, AI understanding to specific business problems that are specific to that company, that division, that business and that process. And, repeating this many times successfully over the years with, let's say, resources that are, or talent that is outside the organization, I think it's something that, should be thought about carefully, because in fact, what you're doing in that process is developing a deeper understanding. So every time you model a business process within your company with AI, you're actually gaining a much deeper perspective of that particular process, because exactly as Minh said, there are places where we really don't understand, and if you've applied AI to the right kind of business process, you come away with a deeper understanding of it. So there is, I think, a significant argument to be made. Yes, of course, it's hard because the process I just described is entirely non-trivial. It cannot come out of a box, but what comes out of it essentially is over a period of time an accumulation of knowledge that is very core to the business itself. So an argument to be made, keeping it homegrown.
Yes, you and I are aligned. Where there's a little bit of daylight is only if you're patient enough and you can afford it. Because too many business teams, and I'm sure you've interacted, think about the hype and they think you can do it in 6 months. And so the biggest mistake I think the AI community has ever done was to call it artificial intelligence. We should have just came up with a different name, because our business leaders think it's a magic solution and they want it in 6 months. So I think you and I are totally aligned.
I love the diversity of the opinions here, and I think that my 2 bits would be that AI is such a almost abused term at this point in terms of all the different ways in which it's defined. And in my experience, I feel like starting with strong data governance and a strong definition of what the business problems are that you're trying to solve, and keeping it simple rather than going straight for the fancy solutions and the most exciting solutions to leverage data to make intelligent decisions. I think, Ambica, that really resonated with me, that nothing is more successful than success. And I think those kind of that low-hanging fruit, those easy wins where data can make strategic decisions, especially in not AI native or large tech organizations without the dollars or resources to throw at this, will come from simple regression models or very small pieces of analysis leveraging well-organized data that may not fall into the AI realm as people think of it, but it'll build that trust of the business stakeholders in your data organization that then allows you to, double down on those investments. So, which I think leads into the next question here is, how do you see businesses changing culturally as more decisions are made by machines? And I love this question because I likely would always move away from the idea of decisions being made by machines. I'll layer in my own personal thought there, and if there's disagreement, I think that'll be an enjoyable conversation. Is that my belief is that there should always be a human in the loop, especially given the kind of work that we're doing in Orangetheory, where we've got people working out, physically exerting themselves. We don't want to get to a point where you're automating things without a human in the loop, without experts in the loop. So I think that it's an exciting question. I'd be curious to hear everyone's thoughts, and I think I'm getting a request here, which I'll go ahead and put it out into the universe and see what happens. Is we'd like Gabe to tell us a joke as well as part of his answer.
Trust me, you don't want me to tell you a joke.
But yeah, let's take it away. Minh, Ambica, Mahe, Gabe, anybody who'd like to jump in? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Look, I can jump in. The thing I personally believe in is machines making decisions, we are far away. They're really helping us to really give a perspective. Either it's a personalization, or you are talking about automation, or certain aspects of how you can communicate more effectively. There is a difference between communication and really what is explanation. Just you communicate with multiple devices, you are everywhere, doesn't mean you are understandable for others. So AI is much more about how do we, at this stage at least, how you can personalize and automate most of the infrastructure, what you have, so that you are basically reducing the cost and time. That is a primary essence what people are really thinking. But culturally, the change is much more deeper, because you cannot really change culture just by a technology or an infrastructure. culture has a much more deeper rooted idea about how humans really behave. Behavior is not really going to correlate, at least at this point of time. Digital behavior is not the behavior. Human behavior is much more deeper and probably 200x deeper in terms of what a digital behavior is. So how do we really manifest that is very important. And what I really believe in is we can make decisions faster with the data what we get through AI, but we cannot make a complete decision just by using AI, at least at this point of time, because there is so much bias in the data what we have collected or the data itself, what we're really dealing with. In our case, like I'll give you an example. Our purpose is to really help people find the right job. Like a billion people find the right job. And if you really look at from that perspective, we want to give talent much more options than they ever had. So how do we use AI to make sure people get those options? But at the same time, businesses want to reduce time and cost to bring people and grow people. So how do you really create this ecosystem of human aspirations to business needs and use AI in that particular section is very, very important. And for that, wherever you can personalize and automate is where the whole infrastructure is going to happen.
And maybe I'll jump in. Ravi Kumar, if we're talking about culture and people, Ravi Kumar at Emphasis has a really interesting perspective on this, which is you have kind of the business and the workers of the past, which were problem executors, people doing repetitive tasks. And that was the first thing to really be automated. Currently you have workers who are valued who are problem solvers. People can take a complex problem and solve that problem. AI is now able to do many of those things. And so a lot of those jobs are actually, changing and being automated or replaced through AI. And the perspective of the future worker and the future culture and what should be valued in a corporation would be problem finders. People who can look at novel challenges and come up with solutions that people don't even know they need yet. And so that requires creativity and innovation, a culture of creativity and innovation. And that just doesn't happen accidentally. That requires specific initiatives and training, building an entrepreneurial mindset, things like design thinking, and developing higher levels of skills among employees, and teaching the employees to program the machines, teaching everybody and empowering everybody to be more creative and create new and novel solutions, low-code environments and things like that. So I think culturally the organization may go from problem solving to actually problem seeking and more time and more energy spent on innovation.
Taking off from I love that Gabe, moving from problem solving to problem finding, and in fact, to just carry on that theme a little bit, I think it also brings up the question: what kind of AI, are we really investing in? What kind of AI is something that we really should, be looking to invest in, looking to grow within companies? And I think the question, an interesting way to look at it is, when you deploy a technology that has the effect of at least partially displacing, some amount of human labor, a research study shows that the net effect of productivity is very, very important. So not just is there a labor displacement effect, in fact, has that technology produced a whole set, a set of human activity that essentially makes the entire process more productive. And that I think Gabe is exactly fits into where in fact it creates the ability and the space for problem finders to then begin to operate. And I found this a very interesting way to look at in fact what kind of AI we are doing within companies. And at Michelin, again, like Ameen said, it is we are very, very clear that there is always a human in the loop. There is always a layer of human intelligence, and but the way that the loop is designed and the way that that process is redesigned using AI is in fact something we think about very carefully, because we are looking for that additional productivity lift out of the AI applications that we are deploying.
Minh, I'd love for you to take us over the finish line on this one.
Sure. And listen, I'm learning a lot from our panelists here. I'm actually taking notes. If you see me typing, apologies. The way I think about machines and culture, if the change management is done well, because we know it's coming, so let's work on the change management. If it's done well, the weaving in of AI or machines into how we work is taken for granted and not threatening to humans, if we do it well. If we don't do it well, a company could be facing challenges with unions, or equally worse, over-rely on machines and AI to do things it's not able to do. I think in the preparation for all this, we need to turn down the hype, turn up the technology literacy of our workforce, and continue to enrich the jobs that humans do, which may require reskilling. So the value proposition shouldn't be these robots are coming and it's a threat. It should be, let's continue to grow you in your skill set. Culturally, we need to get away from zero-sum assumptions like machines versus humans. It's more likely that we'll have cobots versus robots working, replacing humans. It's more likely that we'll have AI help humans make complex decisions rather than replace humans in the decision making. That's kind of my opinion on how it would change. And I think the next 5 to 7 years is super important.
I love that. I love that, Minh, and I think everyone's answers here got me thinking that it's really a shift in the language that we use. I think even the question, the way it's phrased in more decisions are made by machines, there's this implication of a shift of the decision going from humans to machines. And it's the same as saying more calculations are done by machines. All calculations are, everyone on a computer is using a machine to do it's about augmenting the human skill and human intelligence and the human ability to improvise to new circumstances, and allowing the human to focus on that, which the human's better at, that the machine's, far away from ever getting to. And I think it lets us shift our mindset from thinking about that human versus machine debate to intuition versus data-driven decisions, which I think is really the problem of today when it comes to data organizations and business organizations and product organizations coming to a head with each other, is how do you better direct and inform intuition with data? And that's really the debate that, at least in my experience, in a meeting, that I'll probably have after this panel, will likely be like, all right, how do we balance 20 years of intuition with something a statistician found in a data set versus machines replacing human labor? I think they're both very important discussions, but I think the language and the phrasing leads us to one debate versus another. And it was interesting to see how this kind of went. So I think that was cool. But if there's any additional thoughts, I'm happy to keep the conversation going on this.
Let me add one thing.
Yeah.
The one most important thing which I constantly thought about is skills is what is the most important discussion right now everybody is going through. But skills are to create jobs. Competencies is what creates your career. Behaviors are what creates your life. So people have to, right now, the whole AI infrastructure can only displace or really work on skills infrastructure only. They cannot really go into competencies because competencies are much more skills and behaviors are much more elaborative than that. So the major point right now is how do we really think about these things in a much more thoughtful way? Which particular portions AI will have impact and which particular it has no impact, which is what you are really talking about, intuitions versus how the data calculation is. Data calculation is a pure, simple skill set. But intuition about how to make a judgment call is more a competence within a context. So how do we differentiate those things in business is very, very critical. And how leaders think about it is also very critical.
I agree, and actually that's a really good segue, Mahe. It's almost like you got my next question in front of you. To do AI well, what types of people within or outside of an organization do companies need to help them achieve their goals for deploying AI successfully? So I guess the reason I thought of that as a segue, Mahe, is that this focus on skills and competencies, we can go through the list of job descriptions that exist, which is probably the largest collection of word soup I've seen: business intelligence engineer, data science hyphen machine learning scientist hyphen data engineering, and every combination of those 7 words you can think of. But I think there's a outer sphere of, within the data organization, outside the data organization, but even the consumer becoming more aware and their expectations changing. So what kind of skills and competencies and people are involved at each layer of that onion to deploy AI well? In the places, I guess I'll add my own little filter to the question, where we've, let's say, collectively decided that AI is the appropriate solution. So I'll hand that over to the panel for discussion.
I'll put out a little bit of a provocative perspective. At this point, if we're talking about people and what type of people we need, at this point, it's nearly impossible to hire externally. 8 in 10 companies report major skills gap, with AI machine learning at the top of the list of those skills gaps. And one of our clients, a top US bank, posted 160 data science positions to hire, and 6 months later, they had hired 8. So in terms of like bringing in external talent, good luck. And even if you could hire, the problem with hiring a fresh AI machine learning engineer out of college, for example, is they understand the math, but they don't necessarily understand your business context. So I think really the way to think about this, the type of people you need to develop within your organization, is take the assets you have, take the very smart, talented people you have who understand the business context, and getting trained on data science and machine learning. And as an example of this, Shell worked with Udacity to train their geological, civil, and mechanical engineers across 70 countries to get machine learning deployed across the world. And we put together a program called Citizen Data Scientist. And why that was impactful was some of their first graduates built a machine learning model that took streaming sensor data from every oil rig across the world, and were able to predict mechanical failures 2 weeks in advance. And every outage avoided was a $2 million savings. And so if you take people who really understand your business, who have good fundamental math skills, say, but don't understand data science and machine learning, get them skilled up in the skills they need, they know where to deploy it, and you can actually kind of get a wider dispersion and leverage than just bringing in external talent that don't understand the context.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. As I said before, I think to me, as to, where we are in the whole journey with AI as a technology, particularly for larger companies that are so-called, understood to be not, technology native, not born, born AI, born technology. The adoption, and getting things into production, getting things to work is an issue. So, what Gabe's comments, that's another great way to, in fact, another lens to look at it. The more folks that you have who understand both the business process side as well as the data science and the math side, these folks will become invaluable, and in fact are invaluable, to be able to bring that adoption, bring that trust into the business process. The other part of it that that I'd like to comment on is in terms of the skills. One of the lovely things that has been my privilege, to watch this field grow over the course of my career is the entirely democratic nature, totally flat, totally open, entirely driven by open source nature, in which this has grown, this field has grown, across the world, and what that has resulted in is really dispersed, geographically dispersed talent pools of AI and data science. And Gabe, organizations like yours have absolutely powered this accumulation of skill in in various locations. And I think this is something is specifically now that we've all kind of squarely landed in a remote working land, and by hook or by force or inclination have sort of adjusted ourselves to it, at least for some portion of the time. Something to truly think about, because in a sense it's also been the nature of the way that AI has grown as a technology to be entirely diverse geographically, demographically, from all parts of the world, and there's talent to be found.
Awesome. I really like the perspective that both of you are bringing to the table. I like the idea of upskilling and training, and I think it kind of leads to the discussion pretty naturally of the hard skills or the technical skills required to practice the field versus the kind of soft skills that are critical for adoption of your solution. And as I've led AI and data organizations in a large company with all the funding and dollars you can throw at it, and I've led it in organizations where it's pretty greenfield and starting from scratch. And Gabe, absolutely, recruiting is difficult, and at the same time, recruiting into an organization that has maybe not practiced machine learning and artificial intelligence makes it even harder, because you're bringing in, you can't be really picky about, I need you to be an expert machine learning scientist, but also have this very specific subject matter expertise. So the soft skills and the ability to communicate what a model does is definitely difficult. And it's almost, I battle with myself whether it's more important to bring in the communication skill, that curiosity, that ability to experiment in an intelligent fashion, and then teach the hard skills rather than the other way around, because finding that the soft skills may actually be harder to teach than the technical skills themselves. But Minh, Mahe, your thoughts on the question?
Yeah. I'll give the perspective from what we did in our own company. We started really building a machine learning team from 2013. That was a very early stages because I had a failed business before where I learned how to use my data differently. So at that point of time, when we created, we really brought super analytical kids out of school who has PhDs and all that stuff, who can really execute certain aspects. But what we realized was the vision with the context is very, very important of what you really want to execute. And just being analytical, really having technology skills, specifically whether deep learning or specifically NLP or whatever it is, it's not enough to really deliver a vision. So then we need designers who can make it simplified for an average human being to use the product. Then you also have to think about the customer-facing and the user-facing infrastructure who knows these users in a very effective way, the subject matter experts. And then how do you execute all the four in a very effective format is where machine learning actually worked for us. Whether we really take a fit score for a candidate is actually a fit for a recruiter to really move to the next interview is primarily dependent on how a recruiter looks at it, how a hiring manager thinks about it, but how the data, what you have right now, how you can crunch it effectively, and who can execute this whole operations is very, very important. So there are different skills which you have to bring to the table, and how do you club those teams together is where the critical piece is.
Absolutely. Minh, anything to add to that?
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting discussion, and I may create a little controversy here just because I know some of your business models. So I start with, what is the reality? The reality is in the business environment, there's a lot of buzzwords and dreams about AI and a lot of impatience. And then the second reality is that AI is hard, but at least the kind of high-end complex AI. You could do very simple if-then algorithmic things, but machine learning and AI is hard. Even with the introduction of low code and no code, it's still hard. And then I think about what Gabe and Ambica talked about, which is basically the talent availability. And I am seeing companies across industries want to do really aggressive things, not be patient, and set a hiring target on AI ML talent. and they're not able to find it, just like Gabe's client at the bank, posting over 100 jobs, hiring a handful. And they're hiring to meet their targets, people who in other fields, whether it be HR, finance, sales, would not be qualified. And so I worry, yes, there is a lot you can teach, and communication is super important. But I think back in the Six Sigma days, you also need to start with a core of master black belts, because Gabe can do a fantastic job upskilling and doing the literacy and training a lot of people, but they'll need that constant day-to-day mentoring by people who are truly experts. So I worry about us going too far into soft skills, and I'd rather have a big conversation with CEO and say, hey, this is hard. If you don't have the patience or the balance sheet, let's go buy it versus build it. I'll pause there.
And Minh, I think that's very insightful in the sense that while we may, the point of the simple fact of the matter is that the field is young, the field is very technical, and technical expertise and technical know-how has to be at the center of every AI practice. And one can't lose sight of that. It's when you're hiring 130, 150 people, it is really something to think about. How do you actually engineer, let's say, the handful of 10 folks that you have who are truly expert to actually cover that, and that is something to truly think about. But I'd like to put this in a little bit of perspective, in the sense that this exact same conversation in a way is being had right now about DevOps. DevOps is enormously sought after skill like this. And if you were to go back a few years ago, a few decades ago, it was the same. When it came to Hadoop distributed computing, it was and so I think it's also good to look at it as a point in time, with respect to, and really as a hallmark of where the technology is, in terms of its maturity curve. But there is a maturity curve, and history tells us that this maturity curve will also take the talent market to a more stable, accessible, and mature.
So I think we're at 5 minutes, and I think this panel could probably stay on for the next 5 hours. So what I'll do is skip down to the last question I have here, and how do you expect AI to change the business world over the next 7 years? And I think we've had a lot of interesting conversation about AI, what it means, how to implement it, how to succeed at it, the kind of resources we're going to need. So let's say it all goes according to plan, where everything we're talking about, that sounds very ominous, going back to using the right language. Where do we all feel AI is going to take us in the next 7 years, and how are businesses going to fundamentally change, or are they not? And they're just going to be more efficient at what they already do. So let's start with Gabe.
So I think AI is going to be as disruptive as the Industrial Revolution. The World Economic Forum predicts that machines will eliminate 85 million jobs in the next 3 years. And at the same time, AI will create 97 million new jobs. And so net creation of jobs. The problem is the people don't have the skills to fill those 97 million jobs. And so the business world is going to need to figure out how to not just sit by the side and let happen what happened at Appalachia or the Rust Belt, but to take a proactive role in guiding those displaced workers into those jobs of the future and getting more value from them.
Minh?
I love the stat on the World Economic Forum. The thought that, as I listened to Gabe, the thought that came to mind is, gosh, the wealth gap will continue to widen because the skills gap. So here, I'm a macro optimist, but a micro skeptic. So this year, there's a startup pitching an AI solution to me about every 2 days, literally. I think the definition of AI, which has always been a moving target, will continue to shift. I think the gap between AI marketing and AI outcomes is the largest it has ever been. The conditions are set for another AI winter, like what we saw between 1980 and 2010. But probably not as severe, because there'll still be plenty of funding, I think, from competing governments. But it's more in a business world. So what's happening is, the majority of companies are talking to their investor community about AI, they're spending money. And if the results don't come, you're going to see a disillusionment in their business community. And so the way to avoid that is for us as a community to tone down the rhetoric and start building stuff that works. So in the next 7 years, I think we'll either see the beginning of a new, lighter AI winter, or successfully pivot to practical AI. The choice is ours.
All right. I think we're at time. So unless Ambica, Mahe, any burning thoughts on that last question, I'm happy to, someone else will have to deal with us going over. So it seems like Mahe's got some thoughts. So let's get
the one thing is jobs will change for sure. There is nothing which is going to protect that. But I think like right now, the labor costs are going up relatively, even in the retail markets. That will going to increase the number of robots going to play, because the cost of robotics will decrease as the labor costs really go up, because you experiment more and you know where it will work. So like if you look at Roomba, like a couple of years back to today, how it changed is completely different than what we really, right now, what we are really seeing. But that doesn't mean it is really solving everything. But that kind of a change is definitely going to be there. Almost every job is going to change drastically in terms of what skill sets they have to offer. So people have to be thoughtful about like how that will. But I think like I agree with Gabe's point. AI will be really, really focused on changing a lot of aspects. There is no doubt about it. And there is no failure. It's only evolution.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Ambica, any quick last thoughts? I'm hearing the music stop moving.
Last thought, I think, in fact, I see it that, AI will become business as usual. So it will become one more tool in the toolbox. And that evolution from the way we think about AI today as something that's hyped with a, absolutely justified, amount of skepticism, that change to it becoming business as usual will come with rapid adoption of AI in more traditional industries across and not restricted to certain specific corners of like retail or search, but really much broader applications of AI will lead that evolution and change. So.
Awesome. Thank you. A lot of interesting answers, lots of exciting learnings, and I think let's get this group back together in 7 years to watch the answer. So I think that brings us the time, and thank you all. It was a really enjoyable time talking to everyone.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Wow, what a great session. Thank you, Minh, Ameen, Ambica, Gabe, and Mahe. That's it for today's general session. Like yesterday, we have another set of town hall breakout sessions to enjoy before our tracks kick off. Grab your questions, turn on your video and mic, and jump into one of these small groups to find other like-minded attendees. At 2:30 Eastern Time, our tracks will begin with world-class speakers in finance, healthcare, cybersecurity, and more. Have the best digital conference day of your life.